more in the future. Not everyone on the mothership is communicating with the pilot. It's not necessary. So there's the pilot, which is Gaia. She's sending out the coordinates for the course of the journey. She knows now. It's locked onto a signal on March 19th. Locked onto a signal, homing signal to the pleroma center. And in effect, transmitted to the pleroma center, yes, during the supermoon, right after the Japan earthquake, the 19th. Transmitted to the pleroma center her set of coordinates to correct the course of the mothership, to correct humanity's evolution. And so some people on Earth will join her crew. Some of them will be the crew of the mothership, taking care of it, repairing the ecology of the planet, getting back to a sane and clean way to live in the environment. Some, like the shamans and visionaries, will be in the navigational crew, navigating with Gaia, and that's a fascinating process and a fascinating responsibility. But there will just be some who are passengers, and there will be some rats who will desert the ship, and people who will jump overboard because they're out of their minds. So I wouldn't exactly call that a collective initiation process. I'd call it a sorting out process. And the one thing that I'd like to add was vast subjects we're talking here about, but the one thing I'd like to add to plant as a seed in your minds to think about after this interview is that the idea of impersonal service is not in Gaia's syntax. Service is not in Gaia's syntax. She doesn't want us to serve her. She doesn't understand what service is. Service belongs to the master-slave paradigm. She wants us to play with her. She wants us to co-evolve. And she wants us to do it through the highest pleasure and highest desire of our individual selves. That is to say, there is no sacrifice, there is no loss of yourself in this co-evolutionary bond to her. On the contrary, you are invited and inspired to develop your potential to the highest possible degree and to love yourself and love your own genius as it manifests in the frame of her symbiosis. So this is what we're looking for. This is the process that we might envision facing us right now.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have written that you are contra violence, and Cliff High has said that violence is a trap of the powers that be. He advocates shunning and other asymmetrical responses. You are advocating superior warriorship, impersonal Gaia ethical actions against humanity's perpetrators. On metahistory.org you wrote, "Contra-violence is the use of violence by people opposed to violence who, nevertheless, regard a non-violent response as inadequate in certain situations. The term contra-violence signifies action taken against violence, equivalent to it in strength and effectiveness, not passive non-violent resistance. But the action so taken does not involve direct contact, physical enactment of violence. Rather, it involves activating aggressive, lethal force equivalent and superior to the violence opposed." John, with all that is confronting us at this time by the Archon mindset and their minions, the powers that be, now seems a very good time to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I guess it would be. I guess it would be the moment. Thank you for reading those words. I don't know how clearly I expressed myself there. As you may have noted, if you follow what I put on Metahistory site, I'm taking really great care with my language and self-scrutiny to set out this contra-violence proposition. So what can I tell you right here and now? Well, first of all, I don't agree that violence is a trap of the powers that be. It's a tool. It's not a trap. You can get trapped in it because it has a captivating quality. And violence, if you're not centered as a warrior, and if you're not centered in self-love, don't mean love, by the way, self-love, if you're not centered in self-love, you're not going to be able to handle violence because it has a way of consuming people and infecting people. But violence in itself is not to be categorically rejected. You know, what I'm proposing in contra-violence is that that violent force, especially the violent force of transpersonal rage, be directed against the perpetrators. Transpersonal rage, and we all have it in us, and it's mounting as I speak. I've been extremely cautious in presenting this right action message, but I feel confident that I am speaking to the rage that arises in the hearts of many, many people, murderous rage. And I want to tell anyone who's listening to this that if you feel murderous rage, if you would feel murderous rage toward a man who abducted, raped, and killed your 12-year-old daughter or son, you would just be reacting like a true human being. If you didn't feel murderous rage toward that perpetrator, there would be something not lacking in your humanity. And just as you could feel murderous rage in that horrific instance, and there are many others that happen, events that happen every day that are just as horrific as that, just as you would feel that rage in a personal instance, you can feel that rage transpersonally. You know? To give you an example of when I feel this rage all the time. I live with it. But Kali is the rage of Gaia. And I live in her rage. It's a storm I live in. I heard a couple of years ago that the banksters, the Goldman Sachs people, the financial mafia who are taking down countries with their fraudulent schemes, that was just when they'd gone in and taken down Greece. They set up Greece by manipulating it to violate the credit guidelines of the European Union. And when it had done so, they went in and brought it down. You know, this is how they operate. They create a financial problem. And I heard that these people were going to blackmailing the country of Greece to pay them off by giving them islands. That caused me to feel murderous rage. And that's just one of a long instance of examples. I'm not going to go into it. So I think that I'm certain that I am speaking here to a rage that exists in the hearts and minds of many people. And I want to tell you that you can be a good and decent and loving human being and still have this rage in you. But I want to tell you something that's a little more challenging than that as well. You've got to do something with it. It cannot just be left to boil in you. It needs to be expressed. And so I'm laying out the framework of right action and contra-violence as a path to express the transpersonal rage. And I make no bones about it. This rage can be used as a weapon and a tool, and it can be directed as a lethal force against perpetrators. I'm talking about lethal kill. But I'm not talking about a kill of physical presence. It would be a lethal kill that is effected in a magical way. It is not affected through a knife or a gun or a bomb or poison or hiring someone to take someone out. It is actually shamanic magic. And I would point out to you finally, before we get into the remaining questions about this, we've all seen a massive revival of shamanism since the 60s. And we have an enormous amount of shamanism and an enormous revival of shamanic practices, including ayahuasca ceremonies and things like that. But there's one thing that's being overlooked in all of this shamanic revival, And that is that in every indigenous culture, from the Urals to the Amazon to Polynesia, the shaman in the community could heal and also kill. And you were not qualified as a shaman, a true shaman, unless you could do both. So what I want to put on the table is a discussion of the killing powers of shamanism.
That sounds great.
Thank you, Uranus, and thank you, John. Patrick, you have a question for John.
Yes, John. I think we're going into space goat farts territory here.
Sure.
On page 77 of your book, you had a quotation. The war scroll reads like a weirdly ceremonious boot camp drill intended to prepare the troops for that final hallucinatory event. Can you elaborate on the event and what it alluded to, and what is the non-human extraterrestrial ET connection?
Sure. It's my contention from the study of the Dead Sea Scrolls that the Zadokine sect at the Dead Sea and also other areas around the area like Damascus, probably a sect that consisted of maybe 4,000 to 6,000 people, very small, radical sect of ultra-conservative, perfectionist xenophobes. The zealots of the Dead Sea caves were part of a UFO cult. I believe that they were a UFO cult. I believe that they had seen UFOs, or thought they had seen UFOs, which would have been archontic hallucinations at that time, and that these UFOs are actually described in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I cite the passages in my book. You can read it. If people often cite the vision of Ezekiel as a UFO sighting, don't they? Well, you should read what the Dead Sea Scrolls say about the Kenoshin, or Kenoshin, I can't remember which it is. These are shining wheels in the sky. I mean, the description of them is identical to UFO flying hardware. So they were a UFO cult, and the scene described in the War Scroll is a final battle when the righteous ones, who are the ones who follow the rule of Jehovah, the off-planet God, rise up against the rest of humanity, who are all partying and getting along just fine and ignoring the Father God, and go into battle to annihilate us. This is the apocalyptic ending described in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's a drill. They're practicing the drill for this to happen. They're lining up their armies, and they fully believe that the flying saucer gods are going to come and help them in this apocalyptic showdown at the end of time, which probably we're due to live out sometime in the next 18 months, thanks to the virtues of Operation Bluebeam and virtual reality technologies, So we're actually living out this. Go read read the Dead Sea Scrolls. You owe it to yourself. Read the War Scroll. You can find it on the internet. And you'll see how insane it is. But this psychosis and the idea that the ET saviors are going to come is clear as day in that text.
Thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, John. And I guess you must be really excited about the recent